Hey everybody, welcome to Founder Stories, the show where we hear firsthand from founders how they got their business up and running and how they're still managing it today. Today we're joined by Kath Austin, who is the founder and CEO of BeeBee. So welcome to the show, Kath.
Thanks very much for having me.
No problem at all. I'm really excited to have you on the show, actually. A lot of people will probably have seen you perhaps on Dragon's Den or heard the name BeeBee and things like that, but this actually goes worldwide. So for those who are not perhaps in the UK, don't know who you are, could you give just a brief introduction as to what BeeBee does and where you guys are at the moment, and then we'll go into the backstory.
Yeah, sure. Okay. So BeeBee is we're a company that produce alternatives to everyday single-use plastic products. So our first product was the BeeBee wrap, beeswax wraps. They replace cling film and plastic. We're launching a vegan wax version in the next few weeks. We also do things like plastic-free sink brushes and a plastic-free reusable kitchen wipe as well. Yeah. We've been around for about 3 years now, and it's grown very, very quickly. Yeah, so that's where we are now.
Perfect, great. It's actually a project I'm really, really interested in. I've a few friends that help start like different plastic-free companies and initiatives and things like that. So I'm all for the mission. It's a good one. Perfect. So what I want to get into in a little bit is really understanding a little bit more about your background, where you came from, what gave you the idea to start a company rather than perhaps join another company doing the same thing. So if we start a little bit with your childhood and what your upbringing was like, were you always like a kind of entrepreneurial type child, or what was that like for you?
No, I wouldn't say I was an entrepreneurial child at all. I think I was always a little bit left field. I think my mum and dad would probably say that, oh, she's gone and done a Kath, or, you know, always a little bit different, and not really scared to kind of stick out like a sore thumb. I'm definitely an extrovert, and quite proudly so. So yeah, that helps a lot, to be brave and to not worry about what you might look like. Yeah. I would say that when I was a child, I was an absolute, or I still am really, but I'm an absolute tree hugger, an unabashed environmentalist. There were lots of pictures on my bedroom wall of, you know, Save the Whales and the pandas and every animal that it had a cause going for it. I was right there behind it. Yeah. And that never really waned that much. I was actually vegetarian for a lot of my teens as well. Whilst I'm not now, I'm a conscious meat eater. So so that's kind of my background in terms of childhood.
Yeah, and what did you do in terms of kind of education and then work and before the start of BeeBee?
Okay, so it's interesting actually, because I got very frustrated with the education system. I found it's just very slow, and I ended up leaving very quickly. So I went to sixth form. I actually got glandular fever and left in the end because I'd missed so much of it. But then I went straight out to work. I did lots and lots and lots of different jobs, and I mean like lots. All sorts of things, from clerk to school photographer to cattery hand to pharmacy assistant to endless different things. Really trying to find what I was good at and what I enjoyed. And then I started working in events. So I helped run an event called Strawberry Fair in Cambridge, which is a free one-day volunteer run event. And it really I got the bug. And then I thought, right, what I want to do is work in this area. And I fell into fundraising. And I worked in fundraising for about 15 years before BeeBee.
Okay. And how did you find the whole fundraising element? How did that kind of career path work out for you?
Well, I think fundraising has lots of different revenue streams. And so if you're a community fundraiser, major donor, legacy, or anything like that, then it helps if you're very extroverted and very chatty, and you can clearly see I am. If you're a trust fundraiser, it actually helps if you're not. It's completely discipline. But I loved it. I absolutely loved every minute of it. The team that I worked with were just wonderful. I worked for Arthur Rank Hospice Charity in Cambridge, and they were just like a second family. They lived what they preached about care, and I really felt that. So deciding to give that up and move on to something of my own was a very difficult decision.
Yeah. Because 15 years is a long time. And it's funny you mentioned you're like, oh, I've done all sorts of different jobs, but they're like 3 or 4 you mentioned are all within what I would consider like a care field, like working at a category, or like they're things where you're having to, the objective of the business is not necessarily like I'm a bank and I'm going to make money or something like that. It's all something that's centered around caring for others or caring for animals or providing some sort of support.
Yeah, I guess so. Yeah, I've always been the sort of person who wants to be in a community and wants to just feel part of something.
Yeah, and I'm touching on that because I think that is the basis, for my opinion, of a lot of founders and why they're successful is because they didn't start a company because they wanted to make money. They started a company because they had a mission that they wanted to achieve.
Exactly. Yeah, and I think if you're not driven by something other than money, you're probably not going to succeed.
Yeah, because it's endless hard work. Cool. So what gave you the idea for specifically then, because obviously you started with the beeswax wraps, which is a tongue twister.
Really? You did say.
Yeah.
I was actually, I'd had my first daughter and we were kind of pootling along, and I started making sourdough bread because that's what you do when you have a child. I couldn't really find any way of keeping it fresh other than wrapping it in plastic. And then fast forward a little bit, I had my second child, I went on to mat leave. So I've got 2 daughters, I'm on mat leave. You spend a lot of time either under a baby feeding them or in the kitchen. And so I had a lot of time to really think about what we were using in the kitchen, and then sitting down with the baby feeding and thinking. And you're up all night as well. So again, no one to talk to except this child. And I was just thinking, what should I do? And I thought, well, I wonder, plastic's 100 years old. What did we do before that? There were so many alternatives, like putting things in jars and pickling, or wrapping them in all sorts of different things, like just material. And then people started using beeswax as a way to preserve things, like to seal it off. And then I started experimenting with putting the two together, the cotton and the beeswax. And I saw other people were doing this as well. And I thought, well, I'll give it a go. And so I literally ripped up bed sheets and found some beeswax from a local beekeeper, and I started experimenting.
And so that is so. I mentioned in our last episode, most entrepreneurs find a problem and then take responsibility for it. So often somebody else's problem, or the problem that they're having themselves, and then just like, this is my problem and I'm going to solve it.
Exactly. Yes. And I think I've always got a little bit of a project on the go. There are people in the world who easily want a problem solved by somebody else, and that is totally cool. But I'm always really interested in how I can perhaps, sort this out for myself and then share it. So yeah, that's exactly what happened.
Okay, and so how did you get into going from that then, just trying to solve this problem of your own, to actually, I think I can make this into a business?
Yeah, so I never ever expected or even really wanted a business, because I'd heard lots of stories about how hard a business is to run, and they're not wrong.
Yeah.
Not wrong at all. Everyone who I showed these to, the more I was experimenting, and it took me about a year to really get the formula right, because it's a formula of beeswax and then something to help it give it extra grip and something to help it have extra pliability. And there were lots of other ingredients I tested with. A year's worth of testing and talking to people about it. Everyone's saying, this is a great idea, Kath. You should go and sell them. And so I thought, oh, okay, I opened an Etsy shop and I put them on there. The Etsy platform is a great way to start a business, actually, if you want to. Yeah. And I did a market in Cambridge city centre, a craft market. That went really, really well. And I almost sold out on the day. We made about £800 on that first day, which was such a confidence boost.
Yeah.
And so I was at the point where I thought, well, this seems to be going well. And then a random occasion at a children's party, I was standing next to the bouncy castle, making sure no one's going to get hurt. And I was chatting to another mum who is an extraordinary lady. She's called Estelle Levin. She runs Levin Sources, an ethical advocacy for the mining supply chain. It's very hard to explain. But she was a social venture. And she said, would you consider yourself a social venture? I'd never heard of that phrase before. She explained, I said yes. And she encouraged me to go on the Cambridge Social Venture Programme, which encourages, it gives you kind of 101 how to run a business or start a venture with an altruistic purpose.
Yeah.
And so I started with them, realizing that I would need to give it quite a lot of time. I said, well, I can't do my job and this and the business and raise a family. And so the one thing that had to go wasn't my family. It was the job.
Yeah.
So that's in that year, they set me 3 targets. Well, actually, they said, set yourself 3 targets.
Yeah.
So the first target was to print our own cotton with our own designs. The second target was to leave the kitchen that I was making them all in and get commercial premises. And the third target was to mechanize to the point where it wasn't completely reliant on hands, but it had a way to scale up. And then, so like a day before the end of that tenure, that year-long course, we achieved all 3. So it was a very confidence-building experience.
So did you, it's interesting because there's basically 2 different paths. You can either go and raise funding to fund all of that, or you can try and hustle and sell products to kind of fund it, or a combination of the both. Or which kind of avenues did you take?
So initially, we just sold as much as we could, and we used the revenue just to pump straight back into the business. We never took dividends. We just used all the profits to build the business. Realizing very quickly after a year that we would need some funding just to scale up more quickly. Otherwise, it is pretty snail pace. And so we worked with a company called Foundation East, who I don't think they're around anymore, actually, but they are an ethical funder. So Google ethical funding body or ethical funder, then you'll find lots and lots of bodies in the UK that fund social ventures or fund in an ethical way that perhaps, for example, this one didn't secure it on my personal assets. So my family home wasn't at risk, which was such a liberating opportunity. So we took funding from them, which helped us to scale the next year. Which
is the other side, and people always, raising funds is always kind of romanticized a little bit, but you give something up when you raise funds.
Yeah, so it's either security or it's your business. You're giving up equity, which it's not great, because not only are you not in charge of the business anymore, you have to then talk to everybody else, because they are as much, you're accountable to them. You have to feed back, and in a way, being it's a family-run business right now. We're only accountable to each other, me and my partner David.
Yeah. Oh, that's good. Perfect. And so how did you get those initial sales? I know this is going to be a question everybody's going to be listening. Well, she said she just went out and sold. Well, how did you do that?
Yeah, that's okay. So the initial sale, literally the first one, which is funny because today's 24th of April. The sale was on the 26th of April, 2017. So in 2 days, we'll be 3 years old. Yeah. And so yes, on that first sale was on the Etsy platform. And I remember the day, actually, I listed it and I forgot. And David said to me in the kitchen the next day, did you get anything on that when you listed? And I still completely forgot. Went back and checked, and I had 2 orders. Now, and they weren't from my mum, which is a good thing. So what that said to me was there were people searching for this product and not finding it until I'd listed, because it's notoriously hard to get your first order on Etsy, to get noticed, because it's quite a big platform. And I'm very lucky in the sense that this product was needed and people were asking the questions. So that's how I got the first order. And we used Etsy from April to October, and then we opened a Shopify platform. And we had a massively helpful piece of press that went into the Guardian newspaper. that was in January. We took more orders in 3 days than we had the entire previous year, which was hard to manage. But
I'll go quick.
I think I must have called every single person I knew and put them on a shift rotation pattern so that they could all go to the house and help pack. We did it. We had some amazing revenue from it, which helped us move into commercial premises and build it from there. In terms of, I mean, that's great. At that time, it was all about Blue Planet. David Attenborough was talking about the plastic crisis. It was on the top of the agenda, and it has slipped from there now. So getting customers now is more. It requires more work, and we use pay-per-click, so our Facebook advertising, which is a bit of a minefield, but once you get someone who knows what they're doing on it, it can be really powerful. And we're realizing more and more that actually people buy from people. And then when I put my face out there, which is terrifying, when I put my face out there on all the social media and all the ads, people like to hear from someone who they can relate to and who they believe in.
People are very quickly moving away from buying from faceless brands. Becoming more. If you're already an established brand, it's fine. But if you're just a logo now starting out, it's more difficult than to compete than if you have a personality, whatever that might be, and whether it be multiple personalities as well. But you do probably need some sort of face of the business type of thing. I do think that's an important element. So your main model at the moment is direct to consumer.
Well, it is right now as we sit in the middle of a pandemic. Because there's no wholesale going on at the moment. So our main revenue stream is still through direct B2C. Before the pandemic, when all the shops were open, we had a huge amount of wholesale business going on. So we'd sell to shops and delis and gift shops and all sorts of different establishments. And we've sold across Europe because we have a European distributor as well. So leveraging Green Pioneer, the European distributors' reach, really helped us to move out of the UK. Yeah,
absolutely. So your focus, if I get this right, is on your D2C business, direct to consumer, run ads, build brand, and then the wholesale is coming to you, or do you have a proactive wholesale approach?
It's coming to us, and we do go out looking for it, but we probably don't spend as much time on that as we could. I think we probably will spend more time as we go on because plastic will just kind of drop off the agenda, and it won't be something that people are burning for as much, which they should be, but they're perhaps not.
I wonder if it's interesting you say that. I would have thought you'd go the other way given this pandemic, because now obviously the distributors are closed. Your relationship directly with your consumer is the only thing that saves you. And I think a lot of businesses and brands are working out that if they're a brand, that means they have to have a brand. Like the consumer, their end consumer needs to know who they are, and they're not just some faceless thing. Otherwise, if Tesco's hold all of your consumer data, they hold all of the leverage. And so whatever they want to pivot into, if they decide they're making their own wraps under their own brand and they're just kicking you off the shelves, then that's kind of it. So it's interesting that you say that. I would have thought you might have said we're going to double or triple down on the direct to consumer part of it. Because I don't know. It's interesting. And you said you thinking that the trend towards going plastic free is kind of diminishing.
Not diminishing, it's settling into a plateau, which is good because it's becoming the mainstay for a lot of people. Like, this is what I believe, but it is something that everybody's talking about still. It's so we're getting to the point where we're more comfortable with the habit changes now. And I guess just going back to the direct to consumer, I think we do need to work a lot harder on that, and I think that is our focus. But it's just something, wholesale is what we've done up until now mainly. But you're right, we do need to look at it right now, especially.
Do you have more revenue come, if you don't mind me asking, do you have more revenue come from wholesale or direct to consumer?
Well, it's more with wholesale, but I think it's very skewed by a few very large customers.
Yeah, and that, I mean, that's the way a lot of these things go. If you have a smaller ticket item, you know, a kind of e-commerce, retail type item, often that is the way you hit scalability, is by going to wholesale, because they'll buy 10,000 units from you. To get 10,000 individual customers is hard. Hence, retail stores have a value prop to you.
It is hard to get 10,000 individual customers, but the customer, obviously, when you sell to a wholesaler, you sell at a much reduced price. So it swings and roundabouts.
Yeah, of course. Yeah, it is interesting. You see in lots of brands at the moment kind of really not necessarily panic, but really think about their strategy in a lot more detail than perhaps they had before, because of all the disruption, and now kind of realizing, oh wait, well, maybe our direct to consumer strategy needs to be more at hand than we ever thought possible. I also think it feeds the wholesale a lot more. The more your consumer knows about who you are and your brand, the more they walk into the shop and take your product off the shelf and not somebody else's, the more leverage you have.
Yes. Yeah, I think when they know the face behind the brand and they've heard of you, and I think one of the difficulties with our area is that they're not commoditized yet. Beeswax wraps are it's a generic name, but it's not commoditized to the point where people know that, oh, that's a beeswax wrap. I like buying BeeBee's ones, or so we're not quite at that stage yet, but I think in the next few years, then people will become more aware of the different brands that sit within that marketplace.
Yeah, and then that's where your ultimately your brand like sort of layers over the top again. Like you get the same with makeup and things. Like, how many thousands of makeup companies are there? But the top few do the best. And although, you know, it is more of a commodity than you might think. Most retail things are a commodity at the end of the day. And your brand and what you deliver to your customer in terms of your product, because there are variations, obviously, within what your product does is different to somebody else's. So it's just communicating that value prop to your end consumer in some way. And sometimes it doesn't even have to be, well, for my opinion anyway, it doesn't actually have to be the difference of your product, it can just be the difference of your communication. That can often be a big tangible in how somebody feels about wanting to buy from you. So for example, the example being that you go, even though you might do funding, you go to ethically sourced funders and you have a big social mission versus some big conglomerate who just wants to open a beeswax wrap company. I think they would struggle, because even if their product is just essentially the same, they don't have the brand behind it saying, no, we're doing this for this reason. And then your consumer buys into that reason.
I think the reason is really important because it shows integrity and authenticity. So there's places in the world where people are definitely taking beeswax from hives that have not been looked after properly. They're using standard cotton that's caused a lot of damage to the soil and uses horrible pesticides. And those are things that we really avoided. And so we don't want to solve this problem with plastic and then create another problem over here with the environment and the bees and the pesticides. So you're right. And those things are the sorts of things that we've committed to in our articles of association. We've made sure we've made a commitment. So yeah, I hope that comes through in our communications, that we try and be as authentic and as transparent as possible.
And how do you sit on communications? I want to get into this a little bit, because lots of people end up going like one of two ways. You either go very art, like theoretics almost, and you just make, you know, beautiful stuff and hope that it, you know, leads to something, or you go like very, you know, cost per click. How much is it to acquire a customer? Is that profitable? What's the lifetime value? And is more maths driven. Obviously, the answer is always somewhere in the middle. But where do you sit with your brand strategy and advertising?
So obviously, when we're advertising, we can't just make kind of beautiful things and hope that we make our money back and it sells and, you know, enough. David, who is my partner but is also our finance director, is very hot on the numbers. So he, you know, we will always pull back the budget if it's not performing in the way it should do, if it's not bringing in the return on the investment that we hope. So from that point of view, our strategy is to make sure that, I mean, we do look at lifetime spend, but it's it's not quite as complex as that yet. We are at this stage, we're still looking at the return on the investment initially. And then from my point of view, I'm much more kind of creative direction. And I just want to make a product which is beautiful, that works functionally fantastically, and it leaves the customer happy. And that's my drive. So my communications is all about that. And he's kind of pulling me back and I'm pulling him forwards in a way. It's kind of tussling between the two. Is that what you meant?
Yeah, absolutely. So, and then I suppose, and just going deeper into that, because it's interesting to have that balance in the business. Because you don't always have that balance. I know lots of companies that are literally the top 2 or 3 most important people who make the decisions are very, like, let's say you're a very analytical person as well. That means all your communications, everything would be just measured to, the nth penny. And that's the only thing you'd focus on. Whereas if it was 2 creative people doing it, you almost wouldn't care. Like, you obviously look at the bottom line if you're operating a business, but you might make 100 pieces of content for 2 of them to do well, because you're just like, well, I don't care. I need to put out content, even though you just want to create stuff and do things. And both work, both have advantages and disadvantages, of course. But how?
You do need both, because like you say, if you had 2 creative people in there who didn't really have an analytical mind between the 2 of them, you would spend so much time making things that weren't working. They're nice and pretty, but they're not selling anything. And the business needs to, even a nice, happy, altruistic business needs to sell stuff. So I see what you mean. I like to make the best content I can. I try not to spend too much time on it, because when you do the cost benefit analysis, it needs to be within the realms of what you can make back on that. And so we've made huge mistakes. We've made so many mistakes, but we've learned from them, I hope, and we've moved forward in a different direction. So when we've put out, adverts that have just had the wraps in, they don't do as well as adverts that have the wraps in with me. So I end up going in most of the ads. That's learning, and it always works better. We find that videos work better than photos. So try to do more video.
Yeah, perfect. And that leads me into a little bit of wanting to talk about teams and building that infrastructure around yourself. Because like we just mentioned, having that balance is important. Otherwise you can end up kind of going a bit off track. So how do you think about building your team? How did that come about for you guys? Because obviously you would have hired just your first person, probably almost off the cuff, like, I need someone to help me, who can help? And now you might be a bit more strategic.
I was very lucky with my first person. She's actually called BeeBee, which is funny. So BeeBee worked with me for a few months. She was off here, there and everywhere traveling. And like you say, it just worked. But she's also an awesome person. And that was back when it was just me and BeeBee, and that's fine. Now we have a team of about 17, and they range from people who work in production to the marketing and comms, sales and finance and operation management. So lots of different people. But what I would say about building that operational team around you is that, especially in the early days when you're a startup, there's a certain sort of person who works really well in a startup, and there's a certain sort of person who doesn't work so well in a startup. And that's because startup life is scary. It's fun, but it's really scary, and it can change very, very quickly. And if you're the sort of person who needs to have your ducks in a row, it's probably not going to work. And I think we found there's been some wonderful people who work for us, and they've left again because it just isn't the environment that they're comfortable in working with. The people who stayed at BeeBee have been those who understand that things will change and you don't necessarily have as much control over what's going to happen. But that's really liberating as well, because what it means is that if things are going to change, you can dictate it. You can be pivotal. You can be really instrumental in a business, and not just somebody in a big kind of machine like some big businesses are. You can get a bit lost. And so if you get someone who's got a bit about them, like they get up and go and they really want to get stuck in, it's perfect. And there are people on the team who are exactly like that, and they're the people who help drive the business forward. And then in terms of me and the sort of people that I need around me, I've never felt so kind of exposed professionally, because I'm kind of, it's just me, and I'm sitting here going, I've got no one to really talk to about what life is like as a founder. And that's when I decided to build a board, which sounds a lot more glam than it actually is. It's I have some amazing people who we meet semi-regularly, talk about the business, the struggles, big decisions, and they give me kind of peer-to-peer advice about what to do, you know, what to worry about, what not to worry about, where I'm doing well, where I need to get some extra help. So that's a good idea to do. And actually they work on a pro bono basis.
Yeah, perfect. Okay. Yeah, it's interesting. Did you do like I don't want to say necessarily an analysis, but did you look at, right, these are my strengths, these are my weaknesses, this is where I need, you know, support in, and then did you go and look for those board members to fill that gap?
I didn't look for the board members to fill the gaps in my skill set necessarily. It was more, what does the business need? Sorry, I got a frog in my throat. What does the business need? So we needed someone in kind of sales and marketing. So we got Julie Kervadak and she'd done lots of work with a lingerie brand called Amarella and Carrefour, the big supermarket in France. We also have Joe Metcalf, who is a founder of a social venture himself, who's just recently on Dragon's Den. He runs Thrift Plus. He's just a bit of a genius behind strategic movements in business and where you go and what you do. And then Mark Goodson, who was my mentor at the Cambridge Social Venture Programme, who it was just a natural progression for him to come on board and continue supporting. So it was clear at the time, this is who we need. And as BeeBee grows, that will change. And the board understand that naturally other people will come on and perhaps they'll go and do something else. Or and it's just that things evolve, and you the skill sets in the business needs at the time.
Yeah, absolutely. Like right at the beginning, you might need somebody who's more focused on conversion optimization, sale processes, or perhaps small team management, something like that. Whereas right now, where you've gone into Europe, you might need somebody who's into global supply chain management, because that could cost or save you thousands or hundreds of thousands. So yeah, you'll need to evolve over time. Yeah. No. I could do about sales and marketing, branding, got that to a T, but supply chain, God, no. It's very confusing. There's lots of different rules. I used to work for a recruitment company, and they hired people who've done like supply chain management and things like this, and they would have to know all of these rules of all these different places and how they intersect with each other. And it was like, oh yeah, instead of buying our product from there, if we buy it 3 times the price over there and then ship it through this country, it actually works out less because the amount of tax that you pay is like half. And it's like,
my word.
And it's like, it just gets really overly complicated very quickly. Yeah. Oh, so what would you say? So obviously you didn't, what you spoke about, you didn't just start off saying, I want to grow a business. It was kind of an evolution, like you were solving a problem for yourself, and then people were like, this might be interesting for people. Then it turned out it was. So you started selling without any perhaps like grand ambitions, but now you've obviously, it's almost your 3rd birthday and you know, things like that. Do you have an ambition of where you want to take things? Are you just kind of going with the flow a little bit? How do you look at that long-term planning, as if you can plan anything? You know, if you had a 5-year plan set in January, it's just gone out the window. But
I have a dreamlike plan in my head about what I want it to look like. And I think, in all honesty, I remember when I first realized I wanted to make this business, make this a company, and go for it. I remember my mum saying to me, so what do you want to do with BeeBee, Kath? What is the point of all this? Because there's an awful lot of work going in and there's not much to show for it yet. I said, well, of course, I want to take over the world, of course. And it really was. I've got no grand ambitions of taking over the world. That's ridiculous. But I did want to change the world. And I think I've got from a very kind of logical, strategic point of view, I can see how we can grow. And I think that the key to our growth is to always be innovating and to always be coming up with something else that solves more problems, because there are lots of problems there, and I see them every day in my own kitchen, because nobody's perfect, but we have these problems that we need to solve. We have a better way that we need to live, and I can see us addressing those things. And then kind of the dream-like vision in my head, I want BeeBee to be seen as a brand that people trust. They know that we've done our due diligence. They know that we wouldn't cut corners, and that we've done the best that we can, given the opportunities that we had. And people know the brand BeeBee because we've worked. We actually just launched a range with Lakeland, which is very exciting.
Yeah.
And that was like last week. And now that we've done that, I really hope that this is kind of the beginning of moving much more into the realms of, oh yeah, I know who BeeBee are. I saw them in Lakeland, or I saw them on Avon Cole or Milk and More. Or I want our actual brand to become something people know about and understand, and there's an ethos that just comes across automatically.
So you're looking into more of like, because you mentioned about solving more problems, so that's expanding product line around your sort of core offering, obviously. And is that something you got products in development, or how are you tackling that kind of, well, I want to solve more problems? How do you go about doing that? Because I think it's important. You are right. You have to continuously innovate, or you just die as a company.
Yeah. So we are looking at lots of potential products. One of the things we don't want to do, like, I've got a Chili's bottle here, which is the best hot and cold bottle that I know of. I've tried a lot of them. That's amazing. I don't want to go and create one and just put BeeBee brand on it and say, here you go, here's a new bottle brand that's great, because Chili's do it so well. We might end up working with Chili's, I don't know, but that would be great. But I would rather look at problems that haven't really got a solution that just slots into place, that people are working with now, like reusable bags and bottles and all sorts of things like that. They are kind of what people know about. But why we launched BeeBee Wipe is because people were using those horrible green and yellow sponges and copious amounts of kitchen roll in the kitchen to mop things up or to wash their dishes, and it was causing damage, causing pollution. And so we looked at a compostable, reusable kitchen wipe. And the great thing is we can print all our designs on, so not only are they really good at what they do, but they also look great too. So it's that sort of thing where there isn't an obvious solution yet. Perhaps it's simmering, but it's not kind of reached a tipping point and everyone's using it. That's where I think we need to go next.
Yeah, it's a good point that, like, make some terrible comparisons for you perhaps, but like somebody like Steve Jobs, that's what he looked at, right? When he was thinking about development of Apple, he didn't think, let's make a better phone. He was like, let's make something that nobody's got. Or like,
he created a need for something that people didn't know they needed. Didn't they?
Yeah, and it's that almost like, solving a problem. And you see lots of things in interviews, and it's been maybe dramatized a lot in TV shows and things, but the way his mind went was like looking in the film. What's the film called? It's called like Steve Jobs or something.
Ashton Kutcher in, isn't it?
Yeah, and there's some bits in that which I'm relatively confident are quite true, because I've seen actual interviews with him where he's like, I'm going to put that Walkman in your pocket, because it's like, that's the way he saw the world. He's like, it should be that, like, as much as you can clip it onto your belt, it looks stupid, so we're going to change it, type of thing. And it's having that vision of like, well, okay, we have a solution to this problem, but is it the best solution? Can we do something different? Is there actually this creating more problems than it's solving? That's sort of,
as human beings, we're very, very adaptable. And so what we'll do is mold ourselves around all these kind of humps and bumps in the road. And we'll say, oh, okay, don't worry, I'll just jump over that one, or I'll just mold myself around that one. But actually what we should be doing is how can we get rid of that? How can we change that so I don't have to do that? How can we make it smoother and easier so everyone's happy? And I'm not necessarily as good at this as David, my partner, is. He's the person he's so tenacious when it comes to this stuff, to the point where it's almost pedantic. He will just be like, no, we're going to sort this problem out. How we, and so it's really interesting. Like, he's the one who I go to and say, would you use this? Or I test on him because he's so hard to please, because he won't adapt. He won't mold himself around the problem. He will pummel himself through the problem to fix it. And I think that's what's needed. That's what Steve was so good at.
Yes. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Just like, no, we're not doing a half measure. We're doing the whole thing or nothing.
Exactly. I don't think I'm necessarily the brain that thinks like that. David is, but then I'll go and do something creative behind it.
On that, I want to talk a bit about evolution of yourself, if you don't mind me asking, because the type of person that it takes to just go on Etsy store, now we're doing Shopify, I'm going to 3 different markets this week, I'm probably going to hire that person even though I've only met them 5 minutes ago. All these like different things that you kind of have to do to get things going. It's like, are you selling direct to consumer or are you doing wholesale? Well, when I'm in the first 5 minutes of my business, I'm doing everything. I'll take anybody who says yes. But now you have a bit more structure. You've been going longer. You have a team in place. You can't just be as blasé about everything. Have you seen an evolution in yourself in the way that you kind of navigate the business?
Definitely. David always says to me, if it wasn't for you, there wouldn't be a BeeBee, because I am the sort of person who won't just say I'm going to do it. I'll go and do it. And that's a massive advantage in the beginning, but perhaps further down the line, when, like, in the beginning you do everything because you're just testing out, but further down the line you make choices between what's working, what's profitable, what's worthwhile, and what's not. And I found it really hard in the beginning to choose, because I wanted to do everything, and I've been described as a butterfly, like, oh, that's exciting, let's go over there, that's exciting. And I can't do that. And I think it's taken I had the word strategy thrown in my face so many times to the point it got just tedious. Strategy is so important. I just don't think the business could move forward if we didn't know where we were going, and more importantly, knew where we weren't going.
Yeah.
And like for 2020, I called it my 2020 vision. I'm sorry, I'm a geek. And we had a plan of what we were going to do, and we had priorities within that plan of, right, if we have no time, like now, this is our priority. And our priority was always direct to consumer. And the priority after that was always our co-brand program, like we did for Lakeland. So because we recognized that those were the streams that would give us kind of more security in the future. So as an individual, growing out of mistakes and learning what not to do.
Yeah, I always find generally work with people or businesses that are like in that, they've gone past startup and they're like into scaling, and you always, the phrase is always like the most cliche thing. So it's like, you can't see the forest through the trees, or you can't read the label on the bottle when you stood inside the bottle. And the amount of times you look at a company, and because the entrepreneur at the head got it going by doing everything, they're still doing everything, or even if it's a reduced capacity, they're still doing way too many things. And it's like, well, 80% of your revenue is coming from there, or that one advert, or like you say, like the video ads are way outperforming the picture ones, but yet you probably still have like 30% of your budget on picture ads. And it's like, well, why don't you make that 10%? Like, and then you're probably going to increase revenue by, it's like looking at these little things, and you end up in that sweet spot sometimes where, you can just look at some little things and, like you say, almost take a strategy, take a step back and say, okay, this is where I want to go. How am I going to get there? Which one, where am I, even if it's not necessarily your most profitable thing right now, like your wholesale is more profitable, but long term, that might ultimately might end your brand, because you'll give up the leverage of having the consumer in the front face of the brand. So it is interesting. How did you find going through that process I mean, it's always an ongoing thing, but because you said you made a 2020 vision of things, did you sort of sit down and map things out? Do you do it like that? Or is it kind of just, I don't know, some people think about things, they take a walk or in the shower or something and they just map things through in their brain. Other people like writing stuff down. How did you find that process?
I find one of the biggest struggles that I have is when someone says to me, write a business plan, write a strategy. The biggest problem I have is knowing the format in which to write it.
Yeah.
And what does that look like? I don't know. I know exactly what they're asking me to do, but I don't know how to write it down. And so I found, because I'm much better at chatting, I found it really helpful to have a chat to someone about what I wanted to do.
Yeah.
And then I chatted to a lot of people about what I wanted to do, some of the staff, some of the board, and together this just started coming together in my head much more.
Yeah.
And when I came to writing the plan for 2020, it wasn't written as a Word doc in text. It was put together on Canva. So it was.
Oh no. Kath, I think we've lost you there. Oh no. Sorry, everyone. I'm not sure if you can still hear me or not, but I've lost the connection there with Kath. Oh, looks like her page is reloading. Oh, there you go. Sorry.
I'm actually hotspotting, so I hope it hasn't caused an issue.
Oh, okay.
Let's just carry on.
You had got to the point of saying
so
typing down Canva, and then.
Yeah, so I just use Canva, which works for me because I'm much more visually, pictorially driven and I get bored with text.
Yeah.
I see a big chunk of text and think, oh, I don't want to read that. I want to be able to kind of interpret it in lots of different ways very quickly. Yeah. And so that's how I was able to plan, using the sort of brain that I have and the skill set I have. And I think when you first start out and people just say, oh, you've got to have a business plan. You do, you really do, but you don't necessarily have to write it in the way that everyone tells you to. It could be, it's just an ever increasing spidergram. And I've done lots of post-it note business plans as well. Or it could be the brilliant model that I used, the business model canvas. And there's a book about that actually. So if you Google business model canvas, it's a 1-page business plan, and it has boxes which you populate with your information. So it does the formatting for you. Yeah. That really helped as well. So it's just who you are.
Yeah, absolutely. I totally agree with that. Like I don't want to make some giant like text document, and I wouldn't necessarily read one. The way I do it is just like little doodles. I'm like, how do people find you? Awareness, brand, advertising. How do people? Okay, where do they go from there? They go to this page. So where do they go from there? They go to hit and just map out a sales funnel, because for 90% of what you're doing, that is your business. Like, how does somebody become aware of your brand, and how do they become a customer is 90% of how you get anywhere as a business. Like, everything else is, and optimizing that process, making it better, and then thinking of new strategies of like, okay, well, we've got Facebook ads working. These are going really well. Can we add a new channel? And then that becomes strategy, doesn't it? Well, which channel do we add and how do we do it? But I like just centering everything around that. Like, well, we know this is our process. We know this one works for us. This is what we want to do. And this will get us to our end objective of direct to consumer, for example. In this, in your one would be, I would map that process out. Facebook ad, they go straight to a sales page from there. Yep. And then do you have upsells and things like that?
We've got a few problems with that at the moment. We have upsells at the bottom of the page so they can see what else that they can purchase that works really well with it. But constant technical difficulties causing an issue with that at the moment. But yes, you're right. Like, you've already won the customer over. They've already decided to purchase something. So then it's an ideal opportunity to say, did you know BeeBee wipes work really well with BeeBee wraps?
Yeah, I mean, it's something like offering some, I don't know what it is, 2 to 3 upsells should cause something like a 28% increase in revenue on average. But I mean, that varies wildly depending on, I've seen people get a 500% increase from having 2 upsells. Whereas other people, it's only like 10% or something. But you have those upsells in strategically. In fact, most of what I do with people is that it's like, where are the gaps in your current sales process and what are we going to fill it with? Because you're off doing like 1,000 different things where it's like, well, this 1 or 2 sales processes and those 1 or 2 adverts are bringing most of your revenue. If you just optimize them and every stage of them to the 1%, then you'd probably, I'm not going to say you're going to double your business or make some sort of ridiculous claim, but often that's how people go from like 1 million to 10. Is that point. Going from like 0 to 1 is like doing 100 different things, and going from 1 to 10 is often doing 1 or 2 things really well.
Yeah.
Type of thing.
It's right. It's honing down what's working and then ditching what isn't working. And we do that quite a lot with the adverts, especially. And at the moment, I'm working on ways then further to when they become a customer, what happens then? How do you encourage kind of a lifetime of loyalty?
Yeah, because people only stop buying from you when you either offend them or stop offering them stuff.
Yeah.
So it's always a big way. So I'm getting conscious of time. I don't want to eat up all of your time. Well, I could sit here all day. So I want you to, so you think our viewership is people who are wanting to start businesses, or people generally already have businesses. They're in growth phases, or they are where you are now. And probably like yourself, like you said, you went and asked the opinion of lots of different people because it gives you information to decide what might work for you. What would be your advice to somebody who's perhaps in a similar position to you, or that there's a stage before where you're at, from sort of a mindset position, and where you would focus?
So I think the best kind of advice, or the best mindset I would get into is, for me personally, it was learning that you can't do everything. And it doesn't, Joe Metcalf, one of my board members, gave me some great advice. He said, your business will grow as fast as you work. And I suddenly realized, okay, it's in my power, but you've got to temper that with, what are you capable of? How can you leverage your team? And how can you communicate that? And this is something I'm still really learning, is that I can't just suddenly get on with it. I've got to sit down and think about it in a more logical way. And I think that the greatest advice I could perhaps give myself right now is to plan a little bit better, clearer, and communicate that in a way to the team. So if you're in a position where you have a business now and you have team members, knowing where you're going with the vision and the strategy, and then being able to break that down into the bits that are relevant to them and tell them, will be a hell of a lot easier than trying to do it all yourself and then wondering what they're there for.
Yeah. Absolutely. Perfect. Well, thank you very much for coming on the show, Kath. I do appreciate your time and giving your insights. It's always interesting to speak and get the insight mind of how you're looking towards things. So I do appreciate your time. Thanks for coming on the show.
Oh, you're welcome. I hope it was useful. And thank you. I've learned lots from you as well.
Perfect. Great. Well, thank you everybody at home for watching. As always, like and comment if you've got any questions for myself or Kath. So you put them in the comment section below and one of us will be getting back to you. But thanks again, and we'll join you again next time.